watching, your Fox or CNN. It's scary. I mean, so I end up, thanks God we have this internet. So I really watch BBC. I listen to BBC actually, to get access. And of course, you have New York Times, you have Washington Post, and you need to read. My advice: don't rely on one source. I watch Al Jazeera every day. I watch, I read. I listen to BBC every day, and I read here and there. You cannot just count on reading or just trusting one source, and it's a mistake to do. What was the other question?
Yeah,
you asked two questions, or that's it?
Well, I wanted to ask about the West Bank. That the West Bank
Yeah.
isn't being covered.
Yeah, the West Bank, I think it's the real issue now. Of course, Gaza is an issue, but I think the real issue when it comes to what Israel is doing and regarding the peace process, what's happening on the ground, I think there has to be more attention when it comes to what's happening. Nobody's talking about the whole, and of course, but the sad part, when it comes to media, you get bored of covering the same story, and that's what's happening to American reporters. It's like, how can you report the same story over and over? And that's why it's very important to be there and to find out how this wall, how these settlements are affecting that population, and coming out with features, not only news.
Yeah, I'll just add that as I work for an Arab media station, I came from the West Bank only 2 months ago, but I can still say that every day we have at least one story coming out of the West Bank, because there is on daily basis there is something going on. Either new settlement expansion or new houses demolished in Jerusalem. And it's not only Jerusalem, all over the West Bank. Any place which is close to the wall, you would see Palestinian houses being demolished. The last decision to demolish houses was yesterday in East Jerusalem, to demolish 22 houses. I would say that I'm from Jerusalem. I was born in Jerusalem, and until now, I couldn't have my own house to buy an apartment in East Jerusalem, because it's very, very, very hard. In most places in East Jerusalem, we are not allowed to build, because there are all kinds of excuses from the Israeli government. We cannot build, so we have very small area that is allowed to build in. It's very hard to get the Israeli permits. And so we end up, if you want to buy an apartment, it's like so much expensive. And that's why for many young people now, it's very hard for them even to find a house, because they cannot buy in Jerusalem. So the other thing, substitute for them is to go buy a house or rent a house in somewhere else, like in Ramallah or any other close city to Jerusalem, and then they will be subject to lose their Jerusalem ID if they live in any other part of Palestine which is not Jerusalem. And then there are these attacks by the settlers. This is a daily story that we cover in the small villages around Nablus, Qalqilia, Hebron, where the people are just attacked by settlers. They lose their land. I know a small village in Hebron where we have the people working for the international solidarity movement. They are living there because they take the children every day in the morning to the school and then wait for them to finish and get them back to the school. And that is because there is a very close settlement over there. And there were many times when the young children were attacked by settlers, and so they stopped going to their school, and now they have these people from the international solidarity movement going to school with them and then coming back, and you never hear about those stories. When was the last time you heard that a Palestinian was killed by a soldier? You never hear it in the news, but it still goes on. It's not as high as it had been, but the situation is still worse, very bad. We still have the checkpoints as they are. The wall is taking so much land from the Palestinians. I live in Jerusalem, and the wall is not separating Palestinians from Israelis. it's just in the middle. It's coming in the middle between the Palestinian houses, where the person is now separated from his own neighbor. The geographical face of Jerusalem has changed, because we had the main street going from Ramallah to Jerusalem, and in the just center of the street now goes the wall and cut it. So we had now also to change all our trip going from Ramallah to Jerusalem, going through settlements, because the main street that we used to use as Palestinians, we are not allowed to use anymore. There are roads that Palestinian cars inside the West Bank, and I'm not saying in Jerusalem or in between West Bank and Israel, Palestinians are not allowed to use because they are Palestinians, and they are merely only settlers are allowed to use them. So you never hear about these stories in the American media. Sometimes you could find it in European, probably, but you never see these stories in American media.
Yes. Ahmed Salkini. I had two questions for Taghreed and one for Shereen. I think your comment on the Arab media, I found it very interesting regarding Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya. First of all, I think it's ironic because maybe Shereen can attest to that, but from what I hear, Shereen gets accused a lot of times of being Fathawiya, but yet she's with Al Jazeera. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, that was somewhat ironic, but I don't think, I mean, show me a completely objective news source, I'll show you an ideal world. I have yet to see a completely objective news source. We see it here in the States too, you know, Fox News has a certain agenda, MSNBC has its own agenda, and so on and so forth. But specifically, I mean, that's just a comment. My question is, take us on a journey maybe in the thought process of a Palestinian journalist who is covering Gaza, but yet is covering it for the New York Times. I mean, I can imagine there's a lot of dilemmas. How do you make it an objective story when you know there's so much passion in it, considering the occupation and the struggle and the death and so on and so forth? How do you try to make it objective? And my question to Shereen is maybe taking us on a journey on some of the difficulties you've faced, especially on the Israeli side, whether it's the government or even the people. I know, I think Al-Omari got attacked by settlers recently, so maybe, you know, some of the stories you've had to deal with. Thank you.
I mean, like it or hate it, but that's a fact. And people, you know, on the ground, they know that Al Jazeera, you know, is taking that line. Al Arabiya is that. Thanks God we have people like Shereen and, you know, Walid and whatever. But you are talking about the real agenda and, you know, the editorial here. There is nothing that is objective, definitely, you know. But as I said, we're lucky to have both Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya. But people on the ground, when it comes to the Palestinians, they are realizing if they are watching Al Jazeera, they know. They know what's Shereen, you know, they know like who is, you know, the editor, you know, what's happening here and there, you know. So people are not stupid after all. And, you know, they have Al Arabiya, and as I told you, if you want to get the whole story, you watch both. When it comes to the editorial, what's happening, you know, the opinion, the shaping. I'm not talking about a feature here or news item here, you know, it's different. When it comes to my role at the New York Times, I would say I did my part, and I believe that I did a very fair reporting. But as I said, you know, I'm not working for an Arab media. I'm working for an international media. Therefore, you need the Israeli perspective. Sometimes maybe it's too much, even in a feature you want to put too much of the Israeli perspective, but that's how it works, you know, here. So at the end of the day, the most important thing is to get the narrative of that place out. And I succeeded. During the war, I was attacked by many Jewish Americans, many Arabs. And, you know, Arabs, you know, it's like, how come you work for a New York Times? Excuse me, you know, I mean, like, if you want to reach the people here, you need to work for such medium. And it's very important because you cannot just let it. And I would disagree. I think New York Times and other American media, they did cover, you know, the settlement stories, you know. And New York Times did stories on the settlers. New York Times did the stories on the war. But the thing, What's missing is more of it, more depth, maybe more reporting, not just one story and just move on. You know, I mean, that's the thing. When it comes to Gaza, more reporting is needed, and I agree with that.
Do you think it's balanced?
I-
It's balanced coverage?
What,
Even in
my,
Gaza?
my work, you think?
No, not your work in general, like the New York Times.
I think the New York Times
About
is
it.
doing a good job, you know. I mean, like if I compare it to other, you know, if you want me to compare it to CNN or Fox, you know, I'm sorry, you know, but if if it comes to the European media, it's completely different, I would say. But I think New York Times has been doing a good job, and we did get the story out. And we really succeeded to get the story of Gaza during the war out, and it was really great reporting, and I didn't do one single mistake. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to facts, you know, whatever, you know, I don't want to talk about myself.
Just a quick thing about Al Jazeera and Fatah and Hamas. I wanted to say something before, but as you brought it up, it's just that I don't really agree that Hamas people are the ones who are watching Al Jazeera and Fatah are watching Al Arabiya, because we're really criticized for everything we say, and by Fatah. So if they didn't watch it, we wouldn't have been criticized on every word we say. So I think, no, it's everybody watches, and I still think that, because we're number one as a TV channel. And I just want to say also that we were criticized by Hamas itself, and if you go to the online to some of their websites, you would see that. So anyways, about the challenges against from Israelis, it's still going there. They do control the country, and wherever we go, we could find Israelis everywhere. So being able to come into any city where there's something going on and you want to cover, it's up to them to let you in or no. And for many years, we had to go through very complicated roads, sometimes through the mountains, or I don't know. Now it's getting harder because of the wall. But we had to go through very long roads, to take very side roads, asking everyone to be able to enter some cities. And in some occasions, we had also to sign waivers saying that if anything happened to us, the Israeli military is not responsible. Of course, we don't ever expect them to be responsible, but it's a way of saying that it's better for you not to go in, because you will be in danger. And I know that many of our colleagues working for especially Western media, they just didn't go in. We took the initiative, we used to go in, but whenever it's said that this is a military area, you are not allowed to have any pictures, to film. In some occasions, we lost our tapes, and probably the last one was the flotilla, when we had 7 people on that ship, and all the tapes were taken away. And as you mentioned, my colleague Walid, when he was covering that in Ashdod, they were subject to they were attacked, and I spoke to him, and he told me the minute they were attacked, he went to the Israeli police who was standing there, because they were supposed to take care of the situation. And he told them that we are being attacked by those people. They did nothing. The only thing they told him is, you'd better leave. So he started taking all the equipment, and they were going to the car when they were attacked again, and no one interfered. So it is a very hard situation. I remember once we were in the West Bank, and we were going to cover something, and some settlers just made us stop. And because they had weapons, they said, let us see your IDs. This is not an army, this is not police, and yet they have the right to stop us and see our IDs whenever they wanted. So there are these kinds of challenges, and mostly they were when we were covering the Lebanon war. I remember that whenever we went, we were standing up, we had our cameras, they would immediately come to us and say, you have to move. Although we arrived some places where there was media standing, but the minute we're there, they come and say, now everybody, all the journalists have to leave. And I remember during the war against Lebanon, there was a file against a suit against Al Jazeera, and they said, with the pictures you had, you are helping Hezbollah. Some of these pictures we were taking taking them from the Israeli TV. It was like a panorama of Haifa, and the military censorship, the censor would call and they say, now change this picture. And we would say that this is, but we're taking this picture from the Israeli TV itself. They would say, okay, that's Israel, but not Al Jazeera. So, yeah, these kind of challenges, and because of that, for sometimes we were not allowed to be given permits for our crews to move around. Some, we were not allowed to be given visas for some of the crews who wanted to come from Doha to cover the Israeli elections even. Because it was a kind of punishment from them because they didn't like the way we were covering different stories at that time.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. One of the things I think that really shocked
Could you-
Americans.
Wait for the mic.
Could you identify yourself also and speak to the
I'm an
mic?
attorney here in town and work with a conflict resolution organization. I'm Cynthia Butler. My question is, we saw a lot of on-the-ground citizen journalism during the Iranian election that I think really shocked Americans. We didn't have any idea that people could use Twitter or that they had all that infrastructure that allowed them just to upload on YouTube what they were seeing on their phones. And so my question is there any potential for citizen journalism, or is the censorship organization over there so tight that people can't upload stuff on YouTube or can't access what all the social media things happening here are? Because one would think that Israel, like Israelis, certainly have access to all of that, and within the non-occupied part. And so, do they have sort of? I mean, how do they have military sort of satellite interrupters, or how do they prevent somebody in Jerusalem like yourself from uploading something on YouTube with some settler issues happening?
No, they don't. Usually we have it. They don't interrupt our feed, and we're able to cover. That's why you find these stories in the Arab media. You find it on satellite. You find it. I'm not really. I don't know how much is it on YouTube, but I would say yeah, we have access to all these things. But I don't know how often people will see it here. But we have it, yes. The Israelis wouldn't monitor what's going, or they can see what we're feeding, what's going on satellite. They cannot stop it. They don't stop it. But we're punished afterwards with different kinds, things that I mentioned, like we're not granted permits to go around or visas to go, for some of our staff to go into Israel and Palestine. Sometimes they would not accept to come up on some of our shows, and they would, especially from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they would stop talking to Al Jazeera. That happened for a certain time only, but we do it here. We use every mean we have to spread the story.
I mean, there is, I feel like there is a future for citizen journalism on the ground, definitely. And one thing you have to know, of course, Israel is in control of everything. They even listen to our phone conversations. So, but at the same time, things are going, except you have the issue of electricity cut. Once that's off, you have no access to anything, and this happens, many times on the ground. But I think there is such a, I'm optimistic that, this will succeed on the ground. There are many voices that are sick at all, and they feel that their voice needs to be out. And I think, I see it coming. And already, there are, you have many bloggers, let us say, that you have many people who are using the YouTube to come out with stories, and yeah, it's there. But
Yes.
you need to work on it more, I think, if you want to encourage it. You need to make people more aware, especially the young generation, I would say.
Yes, over there in the back.
Thank you. I'm Nadia Esalar Gill. I have this question to most journalists, actually, but the two of you are here, so I'll ask you. It's, why do you call occupiers settlers? It seems to me that if you make yourself a part of the occupation effort, you're not even a civilian. And it also seems to me that that plays into the hands of the Israelis and simply obscures the issue of the genocide that's going on the Palestinians.
You have terms that you cannot touch, you cannot change, and it's like it depends which media you work for, but I think that's the term that everybody's using and understanding. Definitely, I understand your point, but you cannot challenge your editors and tell them, I want to change that, because there are terms that are fixed.
I believe that the French media sometimes uses the term occupiers, and why is the discussion about whether they're civilians or not off limits in a free media?
Let me just say something. We use the word settlements to point out all these buildings, cities that were built inside the West Bank since 1967, and in the international law, it's recognized that settlements are illegal. So I think also when you say a settler, which a settler is someone who's living in these settlements, it also has the sense that it's illegal, because in the international law, it's very well known that all the settlements that were built on the land of inside the West Bank, it's not legal. So whenever you're living in this, it's also that's not something legal.
But if you write for the public,
For Americans, it's not understood. We understand, but it's like
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, my name is Louise Ross, and I just really wanted to make a comment. I'm kind of surprised that Taghreed thinks that the New York Times is fair. I pull my hair out every morning as I read the way they describe what's going on, and I wouldn't have if I had
compare it to other
It's all
American
relative.
media. That's my point. If you
Well,
compare it,
I rely now on the Palestinian blogs for
I
all
mean,
my
like,
news,
do you
because
think American people rely on the Palestinian?
Yes,
No.
I've got enough Palestinian friends that have
Yeah.
pointed out some good ones. I'd just like to say, for anybody that hasn't been there, the shock of an American like me growing up in this country and then going over, as I did last year with the National Cathedral Group, I was just stunned to see a lot of this stuff in person, to see the settlements, to see the wall, to see the way Americans are treated versus the way the Palestinians are treated.
That's the best way to understand anything.
Yeah.
Just go to the press.
To follow up actually on this question, what role do you think the alternative media, the new media, is playing, and also especially non-governmental organizations, civil society, etc., in the way it's probably contributing to a better coverage? Is it contributing to a better coverage?
Well, let me point out to something that now Palestinians are working on, and I heard it's in some places, probably California, San Francisco, it's the boycott. That's a way of civil resistance that is very peaceful. And in a way, it could be affecting Israel, and that is something we would find many organizations working on in Palestine, and it's doing really a very good job. And it's we have now non-organizational, many non-organizations that are working with others in Europe and in the United States. I just want to see that. I don't want to be this panel so pessimistic, but there is something also. You could feel it, that there is something changing even here in the United States. And by the way, this is one report that I'm doing, and it would be on very, very soon. That you could find that even among the Americans, something that you never expected it before. More and more people are aware of what's going on, although it's in the media it's not as fair as we want it to be. Still very far, but something is changing, and the people now can have access to many media channels in the world where you could get the story from there. So few things are changing, I would say. And going back to your question, I think that the organizations, civil organizations, are really doing a good job with what they are doing of getting more in touch with partner organizations all over the world.
Anything on that? Any thought particularly on the social media or alternative media?
I think there is a future there, but still they need to work on it more. And I think maybe the civil society needs, NGOs need to do more training. They need to focus on the young generation. And, they need to access schools, and that's not happening on the ground. So this is an area maybe someone can recommend to them. What's sad when it comes to the, the media, especially anywhere, when it leads, it leads. And that's what the flotilla has proved.
Right.
And that's what Israel has proved, It's like it took blood, for the story of Gaza to come out again. And that's the reality of mass, when it comes to media.
Yes.
Thank you both very much. I won't say that first and foremost, but I do have a question. Since you're both now in the United States, and I'm Paul Verdine, Friends of Civil North America, are you getting any opportunities at all to have off-the-record, frank and candid discussions with reporters and editors from the major U.S. media, the Washington Post, the Washington Times, the New York Times, USA Today, LA Times, any of these papers or TV media networks, challenging them on their first premises and on their presuppositions? Just one example, the '67 war historically took place, the Six-Day War, because Egypt and Jordan and Syria were saber-rattling and making menacing moves around the border. So Israel attacked and pushed the Egyptian army out of Gaza and the Sinai, pushed the Jordanian army out of the West Bank, pushed the Syrian army out of the Golan Heights. Well, Israel made peace with Egypt long ago now, made peace with Jordan long ago. There is no peace treaty with Syria, but there certainly hasn't been any fighting or any shots fired with Syria in a very, very, very long time. So why is Israel still occupying the Palestinian territories? After all, the UN and the British, when they had the mandate, intended Palestine to become an independent country in 1948.
I think
Do you have any chance to talk about these things with them?
Well, I've been here for only two months, so probably Taghreed can talk more about that. But for me, I would say, sorry, no, I didn't have the chance because, first of all, I didn't cover news in USA. I've been covering feature stories, so I've been going around many states, from New York to Miami, and I'll be traveling again. So I didn't have the chance to talk to any of them, although I would have loved that. But probably Taghreed, because she's been here for a long time.
I'm focusing on policymakers at this stage of my life. I need to change the policy.
Yeah, we'll take some. I think we still have time. Can we take maybe 5 more times extra moments, or so? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Alicia Shepard, and I'm the Ombudsman at National Public Radio. And I must say...
I met with the NPR. Yeah.
Boo? Yeah. Well, I represent you. I'm the listener advocate. And I have to say, this is the issue that is the most contentious that I deal with. And
Terry Gross.
Well, Terry Gross is not an NPR. She's produced by WHYY in Philadelphia. But it just seems to me that, and I just wrote a posting about this at npr.org/ombudsman, that it's what they call the hostile media effect. I mean, I can have 2 phone calls come in within 10 minutes about the same story, and they'll say NPR is nothing but National Palestinian Radio, and then the next one will say that NPR is a mouthpiece for the Israeli Defense Force. And, you know, they're hearing the same stories. So I feel a little frustrated, frankly, at how quickly, you know, you use the word Taghreed narrative. And that there are two narratives, and both sides feel that their narrative, that NPR should take their side. And that isn't the job of the American media. I'm not saying they do a good job, but I just don't see how, you know, there's ever going to be anyone saying, wow, NPR did a good job on that.
Before you answer, let me ask you this question, actually.
Yes.
To what extent do you think that your audience response affects the way you cover the story?
I would say not at all.
None whatsoever.
I mean, I think that NPR, around the time of the Second Intifada, was affected by CAMERA, which, as probably many of you know, is Committee on Accuracy on Middle East Reporting, but is very much pro-Israeli. But no, I don't. I mean, if anything, it may not